During her drive into a new city, Emily Carter, a black woman and the newly appointed chief of police, was pulled over by two white officers. Unaware of her identity, the officers approached her vehicle with an air of authority. Their initial questioning quickly took on a racially biased tone, laced with demeaning undertones that hinted at systemic prejudice. Emily, who had spent years fighting against discrimination, recognized their behavior as a stark reflection of the challenges she had vowed to address in her new role. Instead of reacting impulsively, she stayed composed, observing how they handled the situation. The officers, confident in their control, were oblivious to the fact that their actions would soon backfire, marking a pivotal moment not only in their careers, but also in the department's approach to accountability and justice. On her way to her first day as the new police chief, Emily Carter couldn't shake a lingering tension. The city she was entering was notorious for its conservative stance and resistance to change, especially when it came to someone like her, a black woman stepping into a position of authority. Despite her groundbreaking appointment, the journey to this moment had been fraught with challenges, from battling systemic discrimination to breaking through barriers in a profession dominated by tradition. While the occasion should have been celebratory, Emily couldn't ignore the unspoken hostility from some within the department who had openly criticized her arrival. She understood the weight of her new role, knowing she was not just stepping into a job, but into a fight to reshape an institution resistant to reform. As Emily Carter drove cautiously into her new city, the flashing lights of a patrol car in her rearview mirror brought her to an abrupt stop. Two officers stepped out of their vehicle, their demeanor projecting authority and suspicion. Without any apparent reason, they questioned her vehicle papers, their tone curt and dismissive. Emily, accustomed to such encounters, handed over her license and registration silently, observing their body language and interactions. The younger officers probing questions about why she was in the area and where she was heading carried an undercurrent of judgment. Despite finding nothing irregular in her documents, the officers lingered, dragging out the encounter as though searching for a justification to escalate the situation. The senior officer's casual remark that the area wasn't safe for people like her cut through the air, its prejudice undeniable. Emily felt anger rise within her, but worked to suppress it, aware that any reaction from her would be heavily scrutinized. She knew this wasn't a routine traffic stop, but a calculated display of authority, aimed at asserting control over someone they assumed was powerless. As the minutes ticked by, the tension grew palpable. Emily's calm demeanor and refusal to rise to their provocations frustrated the officers, but they persisted. Every moment of the encounter underscored the systemic bias she had spent her career combating. While the officers treated her with condescension, they were unaware that this particular stop would mark a turning point not just for them, but for the institution they represented. Emily Carter sat behind the wheel, her hands steady despite the frustration simmering within. She could feel the weight of the officers' stares, their questions loaded with suspicion and prejudice. As they pressed her for details about why she was in the area and what her purpose was, she realized this stop wasn't about enforcing the law, but about reinforcing control. Their tone made it clear they had already formed an opinion about her based solely on her appearance. Despite the rising tension, Emily stayed calm and collected. She knew that any visible frustration or anger could be used against her. Years of navigating similar situations had taught her the value of composure, and she remained strategic, suppressing the urge to reveal her identity immediately. She wanted to see how far the officers would take the encounter, fully aware that this could provide insight into the very culture she was stepping in to change. When one officer hinted at detaining her, Emily's resolve only deepened. She answered their questions succinctly, refusing to give them any ammunition to escalate the situation. Every moment of silence and every deliberate response was a reflection of her strength. What the officers saw as compliance was, in fact, a calculated decision. Emily was gathering the evidence she needed to challenge the biases entrenched in their system. As the interaction dragged on and the officers hinted at further detention, Emily Carter decided she had seen enough. Taking a deep breath, she met the senior officer's gaze directly, her voice calm but firm. "That's enough," she said, her words cutting through the tension. "I'm your new boss, Chief Emily Carter." Her statement hung in the air, the weight of her revelation rendering the officers speechless. For a moment, neither man moved, their faces shifting from confusion to disbelief as they processed what she had just said. The senior officer's confident demeanor crumbled almost instantly. You're the chief?" he stammered, his voice trembling with the realization of the situation's gravity. Meanwhile, the younger officer stood frozen, his earlier bravado replaced by visible discomfort as he glanced at his superior for guidance. The senior officer quickly adopted an apologetic tone, fumbling to explain their actions. "I'm sorry, Chief. This was a misunderstanding," he offered, his voice wavering with uncertainty. Emily didn't let up. Her steady gaze held the senior officer accountable as she responded firmly. "A misunderstanding? Or is this how you treat people who look like me?" Her words were deliberate, forcing them to confront their behavior. The silence that followed was thick with unease. Emily seized the moment to drive her point home. "I don't need apologies. What I need is an explanation for why this kind of treatment is considered acceptable." The officers realized they had no defense. Emily's calm yet commanding response made it clear that their actions would not go unnoticed and that change was now inevitable. Emily Carter wasted no time addressing the officers' behavior. With a calm but commanding tone, she questioned their actions, calling out the racial bias that had fueled the unnecessary stop. "I want to know," she said, locking eyes with the senior officer, "why you believed it was acceptable to treat me or anyone else this way. Is this how you approach your duty, by targeting people based on their appearance?" Her words were sharp and deliberate, cutting through the officers' weak attempts to explain themselves. The senior officer fumbled for an answer, offering hollow excuses about procedure and misunderstanding, but Emily wasn't swayed. She continued, "How often does this happen? How many people like me have been stopped without cause, simply because they don't fit your expectations of who should be here?" Her questions left the officers silent, their earlier confidence replaced by unease. Sensing the opportunity to set a precedent, Emily laid down her directive. "For the next week," she instructed, "you will report every vehicle stop you make directly to me, with full details of why the stop was initiated and the outcome. I will review each one personally to ensure it aligns with the law and professional standards." The officers nodded, subdued and visibly shaken. Emily's tone remained firm as she concluded, "This isn't just about me. This is about ensuring the department you represent is held accountable for its actions. It starts here, and it starts now." Emily Carter knew the encounter was more than a personal slight. It was a clear reflection of the systemic issues she had been appointed to address. Determined to turn the incident into a teachable moment, she gathered the entire precinct later that day for her first meeting as chief. Standing before her team, she recounted the traffic stop in detail, sparing no one from the uncomfortable truths it revealed about prejudice and bias within the department. Her tone was measured but firm as she addressed the room. "What happened this morning isn't just about two officers' actions. It's a symptom of a larger problem, a culture that tolerates racial profiling and bias. That ends today. Emily's words resonated deeply, leaving no room for misinterpretation. She made it clear that such practices would no longer be acceptable under her leadership, and outlined her expectations for accountability and professionalism moving forward. Rather than turning the incident into a public scandal, Emily used it as an opportunity to inspire change from within. "We're here to serve and protect every member of this community without prejudice or assumption," she said, her voice unwavering. The officers listened intently, understanding that her leadership marked the beginning of a new era, one rooted in fairness, justice, and equality. Emily's message set a powerful precedent, signaling that the status quo was no longer an option. News of Emily Carter's encounter with her officers spread rapidly throughout the community, capturing the attention of both local residents and the media. Her firm yet composed response, paired with her clear commitment to addressing systemic bias, positioned her as a powerful symbol of justice and reform. Many in the community saw her actions as a beacon of hope, a sign that meaningful change was finally on the horizon. For others, particularly those resistant to accountability, the incident served as a stark warning that complacency and prejudice would no longer be tolerated. Emily's stance resonated far beyond the department, igniting conversations about equality, fairness, and the critical need for transformation within law enforcement. Emily Carter viewed her role as chief of police not just as a title but as a platform to confront deep-rooted injustices within the system. The incident on her first day underscored the urgent need for change, solidifying her commitment to creating a culture of accountability and fairness. She made it clear to her officers that racial profiling and discriminatory practices would no longer be tolerated under her leadership. Emily's approach combined firm expectations with a vision for equity, signaling a departure from outdated norms. Through open dialogue and strict standards, she set the foundation for a new era within the department, one where every officer would be held to the highest principles of justice and respect for all citizens. For Emily, this was more than reform. It was an opportunity to rebuild trust and create a force truly dedicated to protecting and serving every member of the community equally.